Ashley Jones here again for our bi-monthly software success. So I hope you guys are hoping to learn more about My Quilt Planner today. That's what we're going to be talking about. And so I'm going to use My Quilt Planner to help plan the layout of a quilt that you would quilt with your embroidery machine. So that's what we're talking about today. So and along the way, I always like to talk about other things that will help you with other pieces of Dime software. So you'll always get some tidbits of information, even if this is not the particular program that you own. But it also gives you the opportunity to learn what you can do with all of our different pieces of software. You guys that have been watching or have seen me for years know that I love, love, love software, and I just want you guys to love it as much as I do. It really gives you the capability to do things with your embroidery that sometimes is really beyond the limits of the machine itself. So I love that about my embroidery software. A lot of times I play and don't even stitch anything. I love just playing digitally and designing, but also love the stitching too. So thanks everybody for joining. I see that again, we have people from all over. So shout out to every single one of you that are here attending. I see we have Oklahoma, Indiana, Washington State. So my old stomping grounds up there, Georgia, Massachusetts, Colorado, Missouri, Canada. Thanks for joining. And so Michigan, Tennessee, Pennsylvania, Oregon. Oh my gosh, all over Virginia, Minnesota. Oh, I see my friend Reen Wilcoxon from Indiana. So you guys know Reen. She is our collaborator here at Dime. She is the owner of Embroidery Gardens. So, and Ohio, I see Ohio, Louisiana, Arizona. I think we've got everybody represented here today. So thank you all for joining. So while we're waiting for people to hop on, so I don't get too far ahead before everybody is here visiting. So have you guys quilted with your embroidery machine? So tell me that over in the chat. And if so, how large have you quilted? So I love to hear this. So I do have some friends that have quilted a king size quilt on their embroidery machine, which is super impressive. I haven't gone that large, but definitely something that you can do. So if you have questions about quilting, I am happy to answer. But again, you know, this is software related, but if you have questions about quilting with your embroidery machine, I'll do that as well. So yes, I see Facebook user. I don't see a name on that. It says, yes, a queen size quilt. So that is impressive. Brenda Berry says a twin. Hey, Vonnie, thanks for joining. Vonnie's a friend of mine too. So another queen from another Facebook user. So that is so impressive. That's a large quilt, guys, right? So, and if you haven't done any quilting on your embroidery machine, then it's actually an easy process. So, you basically are going to quilt wherever your hoop is, and then move your hoop and then quilt the next section. And so really what we're talking about today is planning that. So, we have another Facebook user. So when it says Facebook user, you might need to sign in and tell it it's okay for StreamYard to use your name. But if you want to stay anonymous as Facebook user, that's fine too. But somebody did a king size quilt just last week. Oh my gosh. I wish we could show pictures here in the comments because I love that. And I see Harriet Ann Palmer says a 50 by 50 play mat. Oh, that's a great idea for quilting. And then Jennifer says several table runners and wall hangers. Also a great use of your edge to edge quilting. Panels. Does anybody out there like panels? That's another really good one for quilting on your embroidery machine. Okay, so today we're going to get started with the basics of My Quilt Planner, and we're going to talk about how to plan that quilting design layout. So like I said, when you're quilting with your embroidery machine, you're going to start and then quilt where your hoop is, and then you move it each time. But we do recommend that you start in or near the center, and this program will help you with that starting point, but it'll also help you with how many hoopings it's going to take as well. And so it's really easy to design using My Quilt Planner. So this program, again, as you guys know, Dime has 14 different software that you can choose from. My Quilt Planner is specifically designed for planning your quilt design layout. The name, I think someone might confuse and say that it's for planning the actual piecing of the quilt, but it's not. It's for planning the embroidery quilting design layout. But there's tons of built-in designs. You can import your own designs into this software, and I'm going to be showing you both of those. And you can also print templates, which we use to help with our placement of our design as well. So I'll show you how to do that printing as well. And so I see we have lots of more people joining and commenting. So Joanne from Let's Go Sew, thanks Joanne for joining. Happy Tuesday to everyone, she said. So I think that's awesome. And so My Quilt Planner, so Diane Constance says she owns it and she loves it. So that's great to hear too. So I am going to start by heading right over there, and let's get started with doing the planning. So I'm going to go to My Quilt Planner. And that way my icons up at the top are what you would see if you only own this software. Now, if you own Dime software, several different pieces, your icons actually also show up over here on the right-hand side because they do work together. But since I'm just using My Quilt Planner today, I have it set so that those icons show up top, and that is setting your default setting to the quilt planner. So okay, so My Quilt Planner, so just to get started, these icons, if you haven't seen one of the software success, go back and take a look at the very first one that we did in February, where I go over kind of what these icons are and how to use them, because there's a lot of them are all the same in all of our programs. So of course the opening up a design, saving, the printing, the slow redraw, the alignment tools, things like that are all the same. So, and also your selection tools down the side here, a lot of them are identical. Now for My Quilt Planner, these icons here, the 6 different icons at the top, those are specific to My Quilt Planner, and those are the ones we're going to use today. Now, if an icon is grayed out, this is actually the case in all Dime software. If an icon is grayed out, like you see here, I cannot select this. It means that there's not something on the workspace that it will work with. So once we add something then that these work with, then they become active. So just to kind of give you a tip there, and that's the case in all Dime software. Now, to use My Quilt Planner, the first thing you want to do is you want to have a quilt top, and then you want to click this option here to build a quilt. Okay, so now in these settings, you're basically going to answer all of these questions here on the left-hand side. And as you answer, it will build your virtual quilt over to the right. So, for instance, once you set the size, you can see it adjusted over here. I'm actually going to go back. I'm going to start with something very basic. Let's just leave the 36 by 36 here. And then you'll enter your block size. I'm going to say that I have a 10 by 10 block. But now you can have rectangle blocks, diamond blocks, or brick. So when I choose the rectangle option, it will let me enter 2 different measurements. So you can see here that it's rectangular. Now look what just happened. Do you see the dashed line all the way around? That dashed line represents 36 by 36 inches. So I do need to fill that entire area. Now, when you're working with your quilt top that you have pieced, and you are entering these exact measurements, it will work out because you have a quilt top to prove it. So I'm just showing you these settings so that you can see what happens differently. So also we have diamond. You can see that puts your blocks on point. And the diamond also lets you put in 2 different numbers so that if you have a square on point, or if it's a rectangle or diamond on point. So you can choose those. And then also here, the brick shape. Now brick, you can see that it is still symmetrical, but they're offset halfway through the quilt. Now I know that these settings here don't represent every single quilt that's out there, because every quilt is basically different. it's like a fingerprint almost. So if we're going to talk about importing an image to design on top of in 2 weeks from now. So make sure you join me for that. If you've got a quilt layout that this doesn't fall into, then I'll help you plan on an image so we can talk about, how to do that as well. Now, I'm going to say for this first example, I'm going to say that I have no sashing, but look at the sashing. You can see whenever I do a 0, it's removed the vertical sashing, and then now it's removed the horizontal. So you would enter the amount that you want. And then in the border, I'm going to put a 3-inch border here. That's for the quilt that I'm working on. And see now my measurements, because I knew this worked. You can see my 36-inch quilt is filled up with 3 10-inch blocks and a 3-inch border on each side. So that's 36 for the width and 36 for the height. My quilt planning goes all the way to that dashed line. Okay, so then for the borders, now that's a 36-inch border, and I can't quilt that all. Was actually, what is that, 30-inch border, not because of the cornerstones in this case, but I don't have a 30-inch hoop, so you do need to break up these borders into cells. So here, you can see the cell number is 1. So now what I usually do is I know that I have a hoop that I can put this in that's 10 inches long. So if I just break this up in 3s, just like my blocks, I know that I have a hoop that will work. But you could certainly break it up into smaller pieces if you want. You just enter the number, that you want to break it up. But I usually look at my interior of my quilt to kind of help me determine which size border pieces to put. Now down here, or actually let's stay on the border for a minute. So now you can actually have more than one border, and you can also have different corner types. So the corner type, you can see that this is called a stone, where I've got this little end cap here. But if I use miter, then you can see it switches it to a mitered corner. And I also have the options for caps. You can see that's where my sides go all the way to the edge at the top and the bottom. And if I switch it to sides up, then I've got my side borders that go all the way to the top, eliminating that end cap or that miter. So hopefully that makes sense. So I'm going to leave it a stone for that cornerstone there. And we're going to design based on that, because I've got some other things that I want to show you that works great with that. Okay, so then the cell color, when you click on this option, let me close this out here. When you click on here, right now it's just to white. So when you click on the cell color, it opens up this color option, and you've got all these colors to choose from. Now, the color that you choose is not significant, but where you place it is significant. So I've chosen this kind of light blue turquoise color. And so everywhere I put that color, the design will repeat for me. Okay, so you can see that I've got them in alternating colors. And so if I choose another color, and actually let me go back here. If I do the same color like this, then that means the same design will be repeated 9 times in the interior of my quilt. If I want to use different designs in different blocks, then just choose a different color. So remember, different color, different design. Okay, so now we can place different designs in each of those blocks. And you'll see a little bit more about what I mean if you haven't used this in the past. Okay, so now I'm going to choose another color. So choose a different color for every time you want a different design. Okay, so I'm going to choose something for my cornerstones here. And then let's choose our border. And then another tip, if you click and hold, you can actually drag and it'll just drop it, or you can click, click, click. Now we do need a different color for our top and bottom border. And so I'm going to choose pink still, but just a different color pink, because the design that fits in our border left and right won't work here. We'll need to rotate it. And even though it's just a rotation, the software sees it as a different design. Okay. And then the preview color, I'm going to make it black, but you can make it any color that you want. But the preview color is the color that the design is going to show up. So if you want to test a pink thread or a green thread on an image of your quilt, then choose that color under the preview. That's the preview color of the design. Okay, so then for the opacity, this is going to lighten up these colors or darken them. So if I make this 10, you can see that it is much lighter, and that just makes it easier to see our designs. I'm going to make it a little bit darker so we can really make out those colors. And then the last option here is hooping sequence. So you've got 3 different options for hooping sequence. Your hooping sequence is where to start and where to go for the second hooping, third hooping, fourth hooping, so forth and so on. And I'll show you exactly what you get on these different ones. Now, the short E hooping sequence, that is a design or a product that we used to have that is a quilt frame. It is the predecessor to the weightless quilter. So if you have a shorty, I would use that shorty option. If you do not have a shorty, then you can use weightless quilter or edge to edge. Now, even though you may not have a weightless quilter or a shorty, it's really about the sequence that you're going to quilt in. And I'll show you that. So even if you don't have a weightless quilter, it is still okay to choose that, and I'll show you why. So now that I've got all my settings, I'm going to say okay, and I am going to start to plan my design. So for this first quilt, let's use the built-in design. So you have this gift box looking design icon here, and that's where your free designs live. So we have 4 different categories, and there are, I think, 100 designs built in. And you can use these to quilt your quilt. They are kind of a getting started, and you may actually own some of your own edge-to-edge designs or quilting designs, and I'm going to show you how to import those as well. So let's first start with a design to put in the interior. And so I am going to go with, let's see what we've got here for the square. So let's do this one here first. Now, I only have one design on the screen. So, and this is an embroidery quilting design. And when I put it in any of these cells, whichever one I put it in, do you see how it repeats in all of the blue? So that's what's happening, is it's basically auto generating the view that you're going to see. Now, if you put it in the green, you can see that it repeats in all of the green. Okay, so whichever you choose to start, I'm going to actually put this one in the center, and you can see it duplicates everywhere. And then I am going to click this one button here that says Fit to Cell. When you resize in our software, it does recalculate the stitches, and all of the built-in designs can be resized to fit your quilt block, whatever you need it to be. Okay, so now we've got a quilting design that we are going to repeat 5 times to land in those blocks. So let's grab another one. So I'm going to go back to my gift box here. And let's go back to the square and maybe choose this one. So again, it comes in on the center. So you then will click it and put it to the block that you want it to be in. Now, I could do the same thing that we did before, where I do click to fit the cell. But actually, I think I would rotate this one so it fills a little more my block. So I'm going to click up here and use my rotate feature. And then you can see that on point, it's a different size than once I've rotated it. So I'm going to do that fit to cell again, and it'll fill my block. So, and it's really that easy. Currently, we only have 2 designs on the screen, and that's in this A2 and B2. Now, it does not matter which one you put it in, as long as you're putting it in the color where you want it to repeat. So now my live design is in B1 and B2. I can only select the design that is the actual design. So I can only select B1 and B2. I can't do anything. These are just the preview. So that's where we would change that color if you want to see what it would look like in a different color thread. Mine shows up black. And so let's go back in and I'll show you. Whoops, sorry, wrong button. One more over, our quilt settings. So here's our preview color. If I go back and choose, say, this pink color and click OK, and then OK again, you can see that it now previews in the pink. Now, I know that you're saying, why are they not all pink? Well, the preview is the design that is repeated. These two are actual designs. So if you want those to show up in the pink, then you would change your color chip down here below. And I just selected this pink that was already on my color chip chart by selecting the design and then doing a right mouse click to select that color. So I'll select a different color so you can see what I mean. So I'm going to choose the design in B1, and then let's choose the green so we can see that change color. So I right mouse click on the green and you can see it change the color. So the only two designs here that work with the color chips are the two actual designs that are on the screen, which are, you can see are slightly darker. But if you can't tell, if you click, you can't select any of them except for the two active files. Okay, so now let's go and design our border and our corners here, and then we'll do some Q&As. I clicked the wrong button again. I'm getting click happy here. So as you can see, if you need to make any adjustments to your quilt settings, then you can click that and it opens up and it remembers everything. I will tell you, if you change the number of blocks or the size, it will take your coloring away and you'll have to re-add your coloring. Okay, so now let's add our corners and our border design. So I'm going to go into the rectangle here and then just choose this built-in design. And again, you can see it added it in the center of my screen. So if I click and move it, you see I have it selected. Now you might remember from previous software success to select a design and move it. Once we click on it, it is selected because it has that bounding box. And then when we hover over it, we want our hand to appear. When it's a hand, you can slide it where you need it. So click and hold when you see the hand, and you can put it in any of those positions. Okay. So now I need that to fit into my cell. So I could either click and drag with my resizing tools. I'm going to zoom in here so we can see that. So these little shapes around in EveryDime software, I can click and drag proportionately with the corners, but with the sides, I can resize unproportionately. Okay, so resize your design either by dragging, or don't forget you have this quick option here to click fit to cell, and it actually will fill that entire cell. But not every design do you want to stretch like that. So some of them it's actually nicer to stretch so that you don't distort them, and you'll know when you see your design. Okay, so now we have a border on the top and the bottom, which is perfect. And then now I'm going to do one on the left and the right. So I can either go back and grab this same design, or I can copy this one. So if I use my features, these are in EveryDime software. If I click copy one time and I click paste one time, it actually pastes a copy right on top of this. I can tell because if I go over to my sequence view, I'm going to actually do an undo. You guys know that's probably my favorite key. I use it so much. You can see here, this is my border design. So we have our interior design in B2 here, and then we have our B1 here, and this is my border design. So when I copy it and I click paste, it makes another copy, and you can see that right now. It pasted it right on top. So I can move that out of the way, and you can see I still have that one left. Now I can rotate this one either with the rotate handle here, or I can use these rotate options with one click, it rotates 45 degrees. So 2 clicks and I've got it exactly where I need it. So I'm going to click to fit that to the cell there. Now notice this blue one. Remember, those are my 2 designs. I could select them and change the color if I want by doing a right mouse click. And I can see that those are my 2 designs. Now, even though they're the same design, they are different because they needed to be rotated. So when I export this, it's going to export each of these individually. So now let's do the Cornerstone design. So I'm going to go back to my little designs here, and let's just grab one of these singles, and I'll use this rose here, and then put that in the corner, and I'm going to zoom in. Okay, so I click my zoom tool and then I dragged a box around it. So click your zoom tool over here to the left, and then I can click and drag and it zooms right into that area. So now each time we've been clicking this fit to cell. So if I click fit to cell, it fills that entire block. I'm going to undo, because you can also click center in cell. So not every design do we want to go all the way to our seam. So you can center it. And again, we've already talked about this, but you can actually resize it using your shapes around your bounding box. And then I'm going to click center again, and it kind of filled a little more of my cornerstone. So I kind of like that. Now, this design here, this is going to go all the way to the edge. Now, normally when you make a quilt, you have a 1/4 inch all the way around, which is where your binding is going to go. So I set this up as my finished quilting size. So that design is fitted to go all the way right there, a 1/4 inch from the edge, because this is the finished size of my quilt. So hopefully that makes sense. Now, let me give you another tip. So these cornerstones, you can see that my rose is the same exact orientation in all 4 corners. If I zoom out, I double clicked my zoom tool and it makes everything fit. Some designs you might want to actually rotate so that they are all facing the correct orientation as they go around the quilt. So if I go back into my settings, and down below, I click the cell color. I'm going to choose another yellow. My first colors that I choose, I try to stick with the top row so that I can remember which ones I chose. And then I'm going to go down to that second yellow here, and I'm going to make that a darker yellow. And then let's go back into another color, and I'm going to make that one an orange. And then I'm going to go down to the next one and go below. Now, do you have to go in this order? No, you can choose any color that you want. But because I know that the different color means different designs, then this is the way for me to remember. I usually put my first set of colors from the first row, and then if I need a variation, I personally just go down that list. It's just a way for me to remember if I wanted to go back and then repeat that color somewhere. And as you can see, these colors are so close together that it's hard to tell. So that's just a way that a system that I have to help me remember. So you can see when I darken this up, the yellows, they are different. So when they are different, the computer sees that as an option for a different design. So now you can see that my rose went away. So now what I could do is just copy, paste, and rotate just one 45-degree rotation. And I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to copy and paste that one and then rotate it once and then move that down. And actually, I think I need that one more time. Yes. And so then I'm going to do the same thing, copy, paste, and then rotate, and then move that over just like that. And I'm going to rotate that one more time. I need 2 clicks, not one. So here and here to make it each rotation correct. So you can see now I have 4 different designs in the corner. So I've got my design selected. I'm going to do center and cell to make sure that it's centered, center, center, center. And now my quilt is designed, okay? I just need to save it and export it. So I recommend you doing 2 different steps here. The first one, I'm going to do File, Save As. Remember from previous, we have all of the stitch file formats, but when you save to the C2S, it remembers all of the information in the background. So I'm going to save as a C2S, and then I'm going to call this our Facebook Live quilt. And I'm going to choose a location. So I've got a folder on my desktop that I can use to put this in. So I've just got a test folder here. And then I'm going to create a folder and call it My Quilt Planner. And I'm going to save that right there. Okay. So I save the C2S file. The next thing that you want to do is you want to export the quilt. What the export option does is it actually saves these individually how you're going to do your quilting. So I'm going to choose my PES for this. So you want to make sure you choose your embroidery machine format when you export. So choose your, whether it is your Singer, your Viking, Pfaff, Janome, Brother, Baby Log, whatever brand, your commercial machine, you choose your format and give it a name. I'm going to call this our Facebook Live quilt again. And I misspelled that, but that's okay. We get it. And then I'm going to click save. And when you click save, it actually saves quite a bit of information here for you. So I'm going to click view and extra large icons. Now I can see these as extra large icons because I own Perfect Stitch Viewer. Okay. If you do not own Perfect Stitch Viewer or an icon viewer, then these will probably just remain the little icon there for Embroidery Toolshed or whatever software you have as your default. Okay, so now you can see what I've got here. So these are our two interior designs for the blocks within our quilt. And this is the border for the top and the bottom. This is the border for the left and the right. And look at this, our cornerstone, every one is rotated just the amount that we need for our cornerstones. Okay, so then now I'm going to click here to open a PDF that you get. It gives you some information here. It tells you your design names, the size quilt that you set, the block size that you had. So it kind of is giving you that information if you need to come back and address it. It gives you an image of the designed quilt. And on the next page, it gives you a recommended hooping sequence. So we chose Weightless Quilter, which normally with a weightless quilter, we quilt in quadrants. So as you can see how these numbers go, it is having us start here at C2 and go from C2 up to B1 and then C1 and then our borders, corners. We're going back to B2 and then we're going to zigzag down this other half of the quilt. Now when we go to the next page, this is the reverse side. We've turned our quilt upside down and we have a the same type of thing. Start where the green is and then zigzag up. Okay, so that's the weightless quilter recommendation. We quilt in quadrants. And so the weightless quilter will give you that sort of information. Now I'll show you what the edge to edge does coming up here in just a moment. Okay, so now let me go back over here. So now that we've saved it as a C2S and we exported it and got all our designs. So now you're ready to go to the embroidery machine. One thing that I recommend is printing a template to help you with placement. So to print your templates from this file, I recommend opening each of these individually. So if I double click this, it opens in my software, and this is the exact size design file that I'm taking to my embroidery machine. So when I click the print button, it is going to print actual size. So make sure in your settings that you have actual size chosen and crosshair. And you can see that this is larger than one sheet of paper, one 8.5 by 11. So it actually has broken it up for me, and I will tile those two together. Okay, so you'll do that for each one of your designs that are different. So if I click this border design here, this is the actual size for my border. So when I click print, I'm going to get that actual size. Okay. Now, again, this is longer than the width of my piece of paper. You could rotate this, but if you rotate it, just remember it's giving you a crosshair. Let me do the print again. It's giving you a crosshair that this is the top, when in fact, when you're doing the top and the bottom borders, the top is actually here. So just remember that if you do rotate this to print on one page, just keep that in mind. Okay. So let's see if we have any questions here, and I'll show you another example of planning edge to edge if you are not doing a block where it's landing, a quilt where it's landing in each block. So let's see. We'll start here with Sandra Martinez. She said, would you use the print and stick paper? I always do, Sandra, because when you place the print and stick target paper on your quilt, because it's adhesive, then the template does not move and you can actually hoop around it without your template moving around on your quilt. So it's just going to help ensure accuracy. So that's why I love the print and stick target paper. But I know that not everybody has that. So you can print on regular paper and use tape, or you can stitch a template if you want. On stabilizer is another option as well. So Jane says, I'm new to Software Success. Can I watch previous videos? You absolutely can, Jane. So make sure you follow us on our Facebook group, and you can watch any of our past videos under the live videos. And we started this in March, so you can go back and take a look at all of them. Okay, so Lee Ferris says, this is a long one, so I'm sorry not clear what my question was on the drop down in the Quilt Planner. There are several options. The PES version 8.9, which one do I use and why does it matter? So you want to use the version of PES that is the most current. Those files contain data that tell your machine what to do. So to trim, the different colors, the newer the file, which is a higher number, contains more data for your embroidery machine. Now, you can save these. These run stitch files are minimum. There's not a lot going on. And some of the embroidery machines will not use the most current version. So if yours will use it, save it to the most recent. If not, then go down to the previous versions. We always leave those previous versions in there for you. So that's a really good good point. So really good question, Lee. And that was her original question. Thank you for the clarification. That is really helpful. And then Shell Saunders says, can you import designs from ProStitcher? You absolutely can. I save to ProStitcher format. Yes. And so if you have a long arm embroidery machine or long arm machine that uses digital files, you can import and export designs to that file type. So when I go back over there, I'll pull down the list and I'll point those design files out in particular. So if I go to File and Save As here, from this drop-down list, the quilters are down closer to the bottom. You can see that we've got several different formats. There's Handy Quilter, Pro Stitcher. There's 4 different formats there. CompuQuilter, Side Saddle, PC Quilter, IntelliQuilter, and the Statler Stitcher. So these are long arm quilting formats. So long arm embroidery machines now and have for a while have robotics so that you can actually put a digital file and it will do the long arm quilting for you. So we can save to those digital formats, and we can also read in those digital formats, which means if you have one of those files, you can save it as an embroidery file even. So let's see if we've got any other questions here. And so Jill Green, thanks Jill for joining. So she says, just jumping on from Alabama. Thanks. That's where I was born and raised. So shout out. And so to do what you're showing now, what software is needed? So this software that I'm using is My Quilt Planner, and it is for planning the quilting design layout if you want to quilt with your embroidery machine. But as we mentioned, you can also use it for designing for your long arm as well. So Patricia Eager says, the software you are using, is it the free one? No, we are using My Quilt Planner. The Embroidery Toolshed free version doesn't have these capabilities. To be able to do what I'm showing today, you'll need My Quilt Planner. And let's see if we've got other questions here. Then how can you add a second border or sashing? So at this time, you cannot add a second sashing. That is a really good question. But you can only add one sashing at this time. You can add multiple borders. And I did show that in the settings. And if I go back over here, let's go back to the one that has my quilt on it. Remember, if you've got your quilt, you can go back into your settings. And from the sashing, you can see that you can only do one. And here you can add multiple borders. So if you have 3 borders, so this is going to take away my coloring, but that's okay. I'm going to choose 3 and then choose your different, types of your borders or whatever. And so let me go here. 1. And then 2, I'm going to put in my size. So let's say we've got a 3-inch and a 2-inch. You can see that it added another border. And when this index number changes, each one of these can have different setups. So you just need to specify the information for that particular border. So if you have 3 borders, I'm going to go here and you see how it starts at 0. I'm going to make that one a 1-inch. and then break that one up into the 3 and then 1 inch there. And so you can see I have each of those borders now separately. So to go back and change border 1 or border 2, just click the index, and now this is the information about border number 1. So if you're like, oh wait, border number 1 is actually sides up, I need to make that change. And then if you go to border number 3, maybe it is the stone. Okay, so whatever this index is, that's the border you're working in. So here we've got up to 5 different options for borders. So very good question, Laura. I love that. So thanks for joining. Anne Philback, she's a frequent flyer, so I love that. So and then Diane Zimmerman says she loves the flexibility of My Quilt Planner. I definitely agree. There's so many different things that you can do. And then Diane Roth says, is this software to use if you have not quilted before, but you want to begin quilting? So yes, you can use this as a beginner. So the biggest challenge sometimes with quilting with your embroidery machine is the concept of the layout of the design. So if you are an absolute beginner, Diane, you could always just start in the center of your quilt and then just do all of your quilting, lining up your designs. But when you start doing more advanced type quilting with your embroidery machine, the planning and the layout really is helpful. So that's where this comes into play, but you can certainly do it from the beginner. I think if I didn't have this in the beginning, I don't know if I would have really kept going, because I'm a visual person and I could see exactly, how many hoopings it's going to take and things like that. So, and then let's see if we have any other questions here, and we'll go back and see another example there. So I see a Facebook user says, can anyone see our message? I can see them, but there's no name if you're asking about the messages. So I can definitely see that. I think for your name to show up, you might have to give StreamYard the ability to see your information, something like that. So, and then how does My Quilt Planner differ from My Quilt Embellisher? So My Quilt Planner is only for planning the quilting design layout. My Quilt Embellisher has the ability to create quilting designs. You can also do quilting fills. You can also create applique designs. So it has more capabilities to create and digitize quilting designs that you need, whereas this is just importing a design and helping plan the layout is what the My Quilt Planner is doing. So that's a really good question. So, and then Ann Nelson says the top right corner is not facing correctly. Can you edit at the machine, or do you need? No, you can still rotate at the machine. And that's a very good question. If you save this and you're done with your editing and you're ready to start stitching, and if you've closed everything out, or maybe it's a day or two later, absolutely you can rotate at the machine. That's no issue whatsoever. And does it work on a 10 needle? Facebook user says yes. So this actually just saves and plans the quilt. So when you export it, you would export it to the format for your 10 needle embroidery machine, and the designs work the same exact way. And yes, you can quilt on a 10 needle embroidery machine. I've done it for a lot of years. I've been using my 10 needle for that for at least, I would say 8 or 9 years now. So, and then Mitzi says, is there a quilt planner bundle software available? So Mitzi, we're just educational here. I don't have anything specific for My Quilt Planner, but what I would recommend first and foremost, if you have a local dealer that does carry our Dime Inspiration Series software, you will get the best deal directly from your local dealer. So you can go to our dzgns.com website, and you can do a locator and see if there's one near your zip code. I would recommend that first and foremost. And then otherwise, we do have it on our site. So, and then the difference between the sash and the border. So sashing is between your blocks, and then border is outside of your blocks. So the sashing between your blocks is what that's referring to. Okay, so I see more questions popping up, and let's answer a couple more, and then we'll go see another demonstration. So is there a limit to the blocks? So should you limit the block size to your largest hoop? If you are quilting a block at a time and the block is larger than your hoop, absolutely. So 12 by 12 blocks is a question that we get often. And so I would make your block then 6 by 12 and design in that 6 by 12 block, or make it a 12 by 12 and put 2 designs in the block so that you know that you can separate those out. Okay, so, but you do need to be able to fit your hoop. And so like my 10 by 10 block, I have a 10.5 by 10.5 hoop that would work for that. And I see that our team posted the dealer locator, so make sure you see that in the chat. So, and like I said, check for your local dealer for sure. Is there software for learning to quilt? I would say, again, check with your local store. Quilting with your embroidery machine is very popular right now. We also do some presentations. Also, look at our past Facebook Live. So 2 weeks ago, I guess it was, or it may have been last week. My times all run together. I did Quilting with your embroidery machine on the Between Friends Facebook Live. So you can check there as well. So lots of options to learn. So, and then how do you import a quilt design? So I'm actually going to show you that next. So that's a perfect segue question. So Facebook user asked about importing a design. So let's start a new page, and I'm going to build a different type of quilt. Now this quilt here, let me go back to my example. I would land each one of these designs inside of my 10-inch block, okay? But sometimes you want to do edge-to-edge quilting. So let's plan a new quilt. Remember, we clicked the option and we're going to answer the question. So for this quilt, I'm going to do 36 by 45. And then I'm going to leave this for now, and I'm going to do 0 sashing and 0 borders. When we are doing edge-to-edge quilting, we generally want to do the same design over the whole quilt. We don't care about it fitting right in our block. We want it to look like long arm quilting. So in that case, instead of putting a block number here, a block size, sorry, I usually put something that resembles, it's not always exact, but it resembles my hoop size. So let's say for this quilt, I'm going to use my 8 by 12 hoop. Now, when I choose to use my 8 by 12 hoop, I usually start 1 inch smaller. So I'm going to put 7 by 11. And notice that rectangle. So that's going to be that's representing one hooping. And remember what I said earlier, that dashed line, that's the edge of my quilt. Now, 36 by 45 is our finished quilt size. And I do have a 1/4 inch past that, but I do want my design to go as close to that as possible so that I get the entire quilt top quilted. So now I'm using an 8 by 12 hoop, so I can increase this number. So if I push 7.1, do you see how it goes closer to the edge? So really it's a 7.2 that gets me all the way to the edge. Now, I don't care that this is an odd size because I'm really going to fit the design there. And that is going to fit within my hoop. So I'm going to have one of these sections is a 7.2 by 11.25. And that means that each one of these, that represents a hooping, and that will still fit my 8 by 12 hoop. Now, again, even though this quilt may have sashing, it may have borders, I don't care. I want to do the same quilting all over. Okay, so I'm going to use this blue color here. And then I'm going to use black for our preview just so it shows up really well. And then let's lighten this up so we can see. But remember, I have every one of these the same color. Now for this one, I'm going to do edge to edge, and we're going to talk about the difference that you get. I'm going to say, okay. And now I'm going to go into, and let's first use a built-in design, and then I'm going to use a design from an outside source. Okay, so here we can use any of these designs would be fine. So I love these pipes. This is, if you have never quilted with your embroidery machine, some design like this, I'm going to rotate it, is great to start with because it is super busy and it's very forgiving. So you can see that it's larger than my block. So I'm going to click the fit to cell up here to make it the right size. So now what I've done in just a few clicks is I have created a design layout and a design size that for me to quilt this size quilt, it's going to take 5 hoopings across and 4 hoopings down, and I will be finished. Okay, so really easy. Now, somebody asked to import a design that's not built in. So you're going to go to File. If you click Open, we've actually talked about this in past Software Success lives. If you click Open, it actually goes to a new workspace. We want our design to come on this workspace where we have our quilt layout. So we're going to use the merge option. Merge is the same thing as open, only it merges it onto the active workspace that you're on right now. So I choose merge, and it gives me the option to go to my computer and locate a design. So now I know I have some other edge-to-edge designs here that I can use. So let me just grab those here. So this is a design from Amelie Scott Designs. So these you may have, and this is not relevant where it comes from, only her designs work just a little bit different. So I'm going to choose the design that's closest to the size of the hoop that I was using, so I don't have to stretch it very much. So I was using the 7 by 11, so I can even use the 6 by 11 or the 7 by 13, whichever you prefer. And I'm going to choose my machine format, so whatever machine you're working with. And then I'm going to change my view so I can see them. Now remember, I can see these little images because I own Perfect Stitch Viewer. So now when you see your files, so let's choose, oh, this one is super cute here, this little tropical one. So I'm going to choose this one. Now she has 2 files that you get. It's an A and a B because one is rotated already for you, and I'll show you what to do with that. So I'm going to say open, and remember we only have one, so I'm going to put it, it doesn't matter which cell you put it in, and then when you click the fit to cell, it will adjust that. And as you can see, this one design I will repeat over and over and over. Now, her designs, you actually get an A and a B because it kind of gives you that variation in quilting, and it also prevents you from having to rotate the design. So I'm going to go back and let's do that again. I'm going to do File and Merge to bring in the B version onto the screen here. And I can't use the B version right now because every cell is the same as my A. Okay. So, and the reason that disappeared is because I slightly moved it. So if it's not centered exactly, you can see how it only repeats where it can. So if I put that back into the center of the cell, it fills up everything. Okay. So let's go back to our settings. And what do? If we want to use a different design, we use a different color, right? So with these designs, every other column is a different design. And so you can place that one in and do that fit to cell, and then everything is lined up perfectly. So to use outside designs, File and Merge is what you want to do. Now let's export this, and I want to show you one thing before we go here. So I'm going to remember 2 things. You're going to do File, Save As, and you want to save this as your C2S so that it remembers this. So I'm going to call this my edge-to-edge quilt. And then I'm going to go back to my folder where I was saving my test quilt here and click Save. And then I'm going to export for the second time. So for the second save. So this one, again, is our edge-to-edge. And this one, because I'm exporting the files that I need for my embroidery machine, I want to choose my embroidery machine format. Choose your machine format, click Save, and it will save those files for you. Now this one, there are fewer files. I only have 2 designs for this particular one, but I get my PDF. Let's take a look at what happens with the PDF this time. So here with the PDF, because I chose edge to edge, edge to edge is a term popularized by Amelie Scott, and she quilts in columns. She still starts somewhere near the center, but we have set this up to give you an idea of quilting if you're using a design that does require a different design each column. So you'll start here, you'll quilt this C column, you'll move over to D, you'll quilt that column with the second design, and then you'll move over to E, and you'll go back to that first design and quilt that column. Then when you flip the quilt around, you'll be quilting those last 2 columns. So the PDF that you get that helps you of where to start and where to hoop, that has to do, I'm going to go back over here, that has to do with that hoop sequence option that you choose here. So even if you don't have a weightless quilter, it's going to give you a recommendation for hooping and quilting in a quadrant. This one is going to give you a hooping and quilting in a row. And the short E, we actually just start from the top corner and then go all the way down. So the short E is just a little bit different. So choose that, and that has to do with the PDF. Now I'm going to close this out. and show you what happens when we want to open up a design that we have closed out. So here's our individual designs. I'm just going to say, no, I don't want to save it. And so now if I go to the folder where we had our test designs, let me show you why I saved that C2S and that individual file. Okay, so let's go to the edge to edge. Remember in here, if I open this up, these are just the quilting designs. So if I double click it or drag it onto my workspace, it is just the design, and I can now print my template. Okay, if I want to get back to that quilt layout, that is what the C2S file does for me. So I can open up the C2S file and I'm right back where I left off. I don't have to replan my quilt. Maybe I just want a different design here. So if I go in, I can choose a different design. So maybe this one. And now this design looks great all over, but it also looks great just how I have this set up. So if I just copy and paste this one and maybe rotate it around to give a little bit different look, you can see how we've got some variation there in the quilt. So by saving that C2S file, I can go back to my quilt layout without having to reinvent the wheel. So hopefully that helps there. Okay, so let's see what questions we have. And I have a details on what you can expect in the next 2 weeks from now when we do another one. Okay, so we answered this one, I think, earlier about the hoop size. Should you limit your block size to your hoop size? So hopefully that helped in that explanation there. For choosing the size of your block based on your hoop. But yes, if you have a quilt block that's a 12 by 12, then we don't have a hoop that's 12 inches wide. So then you could set your blocks as 6 by 12, and then you would put 2 designs in there. So it could either be 6 by 12 or 12 by 6 if you have a design that you split. And if you join me in 2 weeks, I'll actually talk about that. So, and then Debbie asked, how much bigger than the hoop should your backing be? So your backing and your batting, I usually leave myself about 2 to 3 inches all the way around my quilt because when you get to the very edge, your hoop is going to hang off of your quilt top, and that'll give it something to hold on to. So about 2 to 3 inches all the way around of batting and backing will be enough for pretty much any size hoop to grab onto. And then Cindy Canny says, can you use PEP to do the same thing? So you can use Perfect Embroidery Pro to copy and paste the designs. Perfect Embroidery Pro does not have the built-in quilt planning template where I answered the questions and it built my quilt. In Perfect Embroidery Pro, what you would want to do is you could manually make some artwork squares or rectangles for the size of your blocks or your hoop, and then manually fill those or copy and paste if you wanted. But My Quilt Planner is the only dime program that has this built-in quilt planning wizard, so to speak. So good question, because PEP is super powerful for sure. And then let's see what else we've got here. How do I import a quilt design? So I think that's where we left off. So File Merge is what you're going to do to bring in a design if it's not already built in. So Angela Hall says, when using a quilt design from My Quilt Planner and you resize the design, does it recalculate the stitches? Yes, it does. And then how or when you import a purchase design like a PES file from another site. Yes, it still does recalculate the stitches if you resize, whether it's a built-in or not. But know this, when you resize a quilting design, and in fact, let me go over in my software again and show you an example. So I'm just going to use this one here for an example. So this design right here is about 6 and almost 3/4 by 6 3/4. And if I use this ruler and I measure the distance between this box. So right now I have a 1.11 distance between my quilting. When you resize a quilting design, the recalculating stitches that we are referring to is the run stitches. So if you stretch it larger, it will have to put in extra stitches to maintain the length of your run stitch stitches, your straight stitches. But now that I am much bigger, I'm at almost 14.5-inch design. When I measure this, the distance between my stitches is going to increase. So now the distance between the stitches in that box is almost 2.5, 2.42. If I resize much smaller, then my run stitches are going to get much closer together. So now I'm at about a 5 3/4 design, and I only have an inch space between those run stitches there. So I say that because a lot of designers will say, don't resize my designs. Now, our software is not in any means biased. It doesn't care. If you bring it in, it will resize it. But understanding what happens with the run stitch design is that when you increase it much larger, the designer has a set amount of space in between those quilting stitches to have a certain look. If you want tighter quilting, if you resize the design smaller for a run stitch design, it's going to give you tighter quilting. If you resize it larger, it's going to be very open. So that's something just to keep in mind when you're resizing. So that's just a little extra tidbit of information there. And then these two designs look the same. What's the difference? So which designs were we talking about? Maybe the A and the B design. I'm just guesstimating here. And so if I open up, so a Maylie Scott Designs, these are not dime designs. These are designs that I own from a company called a Maylie Scott Design. So if I merge in, let's go back to that wherever I was here. It was in my designs. Her designs are an A and a B. They are a slight variation, and they're really kind of a rotated version of each one. So let me go back to that and just grab one here quickly. I'm going to go back to the medium again. And then let's do like this, this one and this one. So I'll do the A, and then I'm going to do a file merge and do a B. And then you can see the difference here. So you can see over top of each other, you can immediately see that they're different. So you can see that this design is already rotated so that you don't have to do that at the machine. Whereas this design here, I would save it as an A and a B, and I had already rotated it in my design to get a new look. But her designs automatically give you that from a purchase perspective. So hopefully that helps. Okay, so those two designs, so that was the difference on that. And then how do I line up the design when rebooting? How do I line, I'm assuming you mean rehooping, Mary Slattery. So when you are rehooping, I would use a printed template, and that will help you line up your design. So the printed template, you can place it down right after you stitch the first design, and that'll help you get that design line up. So Pamela Shep Productions says, just got here. Can you use a 5x7? Yes, you absolutely can, Pamela. You can set any size that you want in there to make sure it's going to fit in your hoop. So yeah. And then Harriet Ann Palmer says, when would you choose the short E and one where you start in the middle? So I would always start in the middle if you're not using the short E. The short E is a particular kind of frame that the quilt wrapped around the two like poles, I guess is the word. I'm losing, there's actually a term for it, but I'm forgetting right now. And so that keeps everything flat. And so I would always start in the center and work your way out unless you're using a shorty. If you don't have the shorty, just ignore that completely. And then does the software tell you how much fabric to buy? So Laura, it is not planning the quilt layout. It's only planning the embroidery design layout. So at the point that you would use this software, you would have already had your quilt top stitched. So it would not give you information for how much fabric. So it would be beyond that point. So, and then here I see a couple of last questions. So how do you square up the design at the edge of the quilt? So if you're doing edge to edge, most of the time we just stitch off the edge. If you get to the edge and you're off by just a little bit, stitch off the edge onto your batting and then just use your rotary cutter to square up with your quilt top. If you're cutting off some of those stitches, it's really not a big deal. Edge to edge quilting all over looks like long arm, and you wouldn't even know that you trimmed some of that off. And then Angela Hall says, but does it keep the same running stitch length when adding stitches, like 2.5? Yes, it should keep the same length of your stitches when you resize. that's why it has to add in stitches, is in case you stretch it really large and it's maintaining that 2.5-inch length, it'll have to add stitches to keep to that. So yes, good questions, everyone. Okay, so I think that we are at the end of our time. Now, if you liked this, I will be talking about Quilt Planner again in 2 weeks, but I just wanted to remind you, remember, we have a very talented education team that you can find them in several different places to get help. First and foremost, if you go to our inspiredbydime.com, you can click on the support option and the community forum, and you'll see all of these options below. To find one of our education team members directly, you can communicate with us directly on our Facebook group there. If you click that, it goes right to our Dime Inspiration Software user group, and you can continue to ask questions there. And we also have thousands of knowledgeable users. So make sure that you check us out over there. Also, our YouTube channel is where you can subscribe to make sure you're notified for new lives, and also our Facebook group that's DZGNS, and which is Dime Designs and Machine Embroidery. Also, Eileen has a blog that has information about My Quilt Planner and other Dime software, and we have an inspiration forum. Now, the last two are paid options, but they're still great options for helping you learn. Of course, you can join me every other week, or the first and the third Tuesday of the month, not really every other week, but the first and the third Tuesday, and I am here to show you something new each week. But you can also purchase PDF workbooks and book a private tutoring session. If you want a private lesson one-on-one with one of our education team members, that 30-minute lesson is fantastic. Okay, so next time I see you in 2 weeks, April 18th, 1 p.m. Central, same time, same channel, we are going to do Quilt Plan Part 2. So I will talk about how can you load an image of your quilt in case we don't have a built-in setting. This will help you design if we don't have the particular layout that is exactly your quilt. So you can load an image and design on top of it. I also am going to give you a tip for avoiding your embroidery. So if you import an image of a quilt that has embroidery, I'll show you how to download or avoid that. And then I'll also talk about quilting larger than your hoop. That came up several times today. If you have a 12 by 12 block, or if your blocks are larger than your hoop, how to do that setting to make sure that you can get that quilt quilted. And then I see one question that, or actually two, that I want to make sure I check out before we go. What do you do when the foot gets caught under the fabric on the side? So Sharon Willis Jones. So you try to not say ugly words. That's step number one. But then step number two is really you just have to try to undo it. I usually will take my foot off of the embroidery machine so I can tape the hoop and everything. I try to keep it in the hoop if I can so that it's easier to get my design line back up, but a printed template can help you line that up if you have that mishap. So but then you just have to pick that out with your seam ripper, unfortunately. So and then Lila Gladys Gaddis says that when you mean what I mean is, how do you keep from getting the running design wonky? Oh, at the edge of your quilt. So how do you, I'm assuming you mean then straight in the hoop. Use the seams on your quilt. Every time you re-hoop, make sure that you're keeping those seams straight as you move from left to right and up to down. So the seams on your quilt, if you're using a whole cloth, then I would draw a few of those markings to go by. So seams on your quilt can make a huge difference. Also, your template placement. Place that template down, and then you will be able to hoop around it. So make sure that your template is also placed straight. So take a look at our Facebook Live for our Between Friends. If you go to our YouTube channel and click the lives, Eileen has done so many Facebook Lives on quilting with your embroidery machine. They can also give you tips for the actual execution of the quilting. So hopefully that helps. So join me, guys, in 2 weeks for the part 2 of planning your quilt with My Quilt Planner.